welcome to episode number 81 of the PE Geek Podcast. And as always, it's an absolute pleasure to have you listening. Now, I'm really excited today to welcome Carl Condliffe to the show. How are you, Carl?
I'm good, thanks, Jared. Thanks for having me.
Welcome, man. Where are you joining us from at the moment?
I'm currently sitting in at work. It's pretty dark here. Rongotai College in Wellington, New Zealand.
Lovely memories of flying into Wellington around about this time last year or thereabouts. Windy Wellington, they call it. Is that right?
That's right. It's pretty hectic here when it gets windy. It's really strong. Yeah, you don't want to be flying into Wellington on a windy day.
No, I'd heard this, and I'd heard this whole, windy Wellington, and I sort of dismissed it. But that particular night when I was flying in to Wellington, the plane ended up having turbulence, and this was announced over the speakers of by the captain, and we were sitting on the ground after we'd landed, the probable worst landing I've ever been on in my life, and they told us to buckle our seats in even after we'd arrived at the gate. So that was a bit of an indication of the windy Wellington name for sure. But have you always sort of grown up there in Wellington?
No, I grew up, I spent the first 12 years in Auckland, and then we moved to Wellington for a couple of reasons. On the flip side to the windy Wellington, they do say you can't beat Wellington on a good day. I'm just not sure that you've been in Wellington on a good day, but when it is good, it's amazing. It's a beautiful place.
Yeah. And did you did you grow up with this passion and enthusiasm for sport and PhysEd as a student yourself, and did that happen in Auckland or just all throughout the journey?
No, it really developed once I moved to Wellington.
Yeah.
My parents, they did something that was really, it ended up being really good for me. They made me choose one summer and one winter sport. And because of that, and because I focused all my attentions on those, I ended up getting quite good at those two sports. So I'm thankful to them for that. It meant I missed out on a lot of other stuff that I really wanted to try. But having those two sports, which were track and field and basketball, I got to some pretty high levels in those, which was pretty cool to achieve.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's very parallel to mine too. I had track and field as my summer sport and Australian rules football as the winter sport. And again, really enjoyed it, really liked the fact that you had this foundational bedrock over many years in that one sport. And I think particularly athletics, that was like a grounding for so many different other activities that you do. People don't really think about it, but it does. It has so many foundational layers that just keep coming up in everything that we do. So I think it's a tremendous sport.
Yeah, we've been thinking about, with having two young kids now, we talk and discuss what sports are going to be good for their development, not necessarily what sports we want them to participate in, but what's going to be best for their development. And athletics definitely sticks up there.
Yeah, no, I am so fond of it, even to this day. And, it was probably one of those early indicators for me that technology could play a role in sort of sport. And, I've got this really fond memory of being at an athletics day, and I might have been 13, and we had just got a video camera, and that video camera was pointed at me running a 400-meter race. And I remember being so motivated by just being able to see myself, because it was pretty difficult back then just to get some footage of you doing something, let alone how it is today. Tech probably was really closely connected to track and field. What about you? Where did this technology sort of interest for you begin?
I was a big gamer growing up. I had a thing for video games, and a lot of my friends at the time had access to video games, but I never did, simply because of the situation that my family found themselves in. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until I got a little bit older and I could save some money, get a job, that I managed to buy my first console. And that really was probably my link to technology. Just a lot of the gaming and how I could see how that was the direction that was heading and what the future could lie just in gaming. But then when I moved and decided to get into teaching, and I could merge the two, and I could see I had this passion for technology and challenging the status quo in the way that we do things, I could bring in those skills and some of the knowledge that I learned from gaming and merge the two and blend the two. And that, I guess, really started my journey of trying to find the next piece of technology that was going to help me in the classroom, but also help the kids who are really, they're the end product, and they're the ones you want to have the positive impact through the technology for.
Oh, completely agree. And it definitely does help when you have a personal interest in it as well, because I know for me that helped me discover things and experiment and try stuff. But at the end of the day, the children and the kids made the decision on whether it was successful or not. But for you, in the early days, you had a lot of success with the use of videos and sort of flipped learning. How did that start?
Yeah, I got to the point in my career where I was a head of department really early. I think my third year of teaching, I was acting head of department. Opportunity came up and I jumped on it. And I had a really supportive principal at the time who just encouraged us to follow our passions. But being a young teacher and a young HED and some of the pressures that came with that, I got to a point where I was just found a bit stale. I found myself a bit stale and I wasn't enjoying teaching, and I thought there must be a different way to do this. And I remember watching some TED Talks, and Salman Khan from the Khan Academy, I watched his one and I thought, wow, that's a really unique approach to learning, having students watch these videos, and then you can refer to them in your next class, and that was kind of cool. And I dug a little deeper, and I discovered John Bergman, and he has this book called Flip Your Classroom, Reach Every Student in Every Class Every Day. And I picked that up. I just I purchased it on Kindle from Amazon, and I read that in like 3 hours, and I was absolutely hooked after that. And I think I may have even made my first video that night. And these were terrible videos, by the way. They were so bad, but it was just, I could see the value in, particularly in our learning area, where the kids that we get, they want to be active. They don't want to be in the classroom, and they just want to be working in contexts that are real to them. And all of a sudden, I was presented with this opportunity to say, hey, we can watch these for homework, and we can do a little bit of learning when I see you in person, but then we can just spend that lesson exploring the concepts in real world contexts, which are more meaningful for our students. And that's kind of where I got started with it all.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess the fundamental basis for those people that don't understand flipped learning is really flipping around where that teaching or that content delivery part happens. So, and it tends to happen with video, but it doesn't always have to be video, right? Am I right in saying that?
No, not at all. And flipped learning is not some new concept that popped out of nowhere, 6 or 7 years ago. Tertiary education have been doing it for years. That you have your readings before a class. You can listen to podcasts or audio, whatever. It doesn't matter. But when you're doing some prior learning prior to the lesson, that's a form of flipped learning. It prepares you for what's coming. It allows the lesson or the lecture to be at a much more detail, because you've picked up those fundamental skills already, or you've touched on them, and it just allows, as the teacher, just to deliver a much better learning experience for the student. Yeah,
for sure. And like I said, and like you said, it's particularly valuable in the practical sort of PE realm, where the kids do want to be out and active. And like in the New Zealand curriculum and the Australian curriculum, there is this theoretical component that sort of goes with PhysEd. And I don't know about you guys, but in here in Oz, that tends to creep into the practical time a lot. Is that something that used to happen a lot for you guys as well?
Well, to an extent, yeah. But the big problems that we have, our curriculum is really flexible, and I love it. We've got such a fantastic curriculum in New Zealand. But we go so we have in secondary school from year 9 to year 13, and year 9 and 10 is just about getting a taste. You don't do a whole lot of theory work. We generally avoid doing any form of writing or critical thinking. And we do a bit of critical thinking, but there's not a lot of assessment and written assessment in particular. Then they get to year 11, so their third year of high school, and then all of a sudden we say, okay, now you're going to be doing written assessments for every single achievement standard, bar one practical standard, and good luck to you. And a lot of our students struggle with that literacy component, and that's where we have struggles. All of a sudden, kids have to write and read and form paragraphs when all they've been doing is practical. So that's some of the struggles that we have in New Zealand anyway.
Yeah. I mean, it's quite similar here in Oz. They might get some early introduction stuff related to theory in the PE classroom. But then at some point, as they go up the level, that theory expectation increases, and the thing that has to give away to make that happen is usually the practical side. So I know my early days exploring flipped was, it was sort of in line with, well, how can I give more activity time back by sort of giving some of that lecture, that content away into the homework realm, so that when we're all together, we can do prac. And I think that was sort of, a nice bedrock to sit it on, where we're able to do something more meaningful in the actual class time. So do you think that teachers who, maybe start exploring flipped learning in their practice, get into this mindset of thinking that if they're just doing a video, then they're doing what flipped learning is all about? Or is there actually more to it than that?
No, there's so much more, and people get really caught up in the video creation or the content creation, and that's the least of your worries when you're wanting to do something like flip a classroom. For me, flipping the classroom presents an opportunity where you can repurpose your classroom time. Then that doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't. You don't all of a sudden give them a video and then, bam, you've got amazing practical-based theory lessons instantly. It requires a bit of determination, a bit of planning to take place. But how a typical lesson that I flip would look like would be, say, a 5 to 10 minute video that they would watch the night before. Then they would have to come to school with some notes. Early on in my flipping days, I used something called a whisk sheet, they were developed by a teacher called Crystal Kirch in America. She's a maths teacher in America, and that stands for Watch, Summarize, and Question. And they play a really crucial part in checking student understanding, because you can create all this great content and put all the bells and whistles on it, but if a kid's not digesting the content, then you're wasting your time. So you put some of these principles in place, or these concepts in place, that allow you as a teacher to ensure that the students are digesting the content. So they'd watch it, and you'd teach them how to watch a video. Kids need to be taught how to watch a video because there's so many distractions these days, and you get them to use headphones, and you explain why you need to minimize your Facebook page or your Snapchat or whatever, and put your phone away, and you teach them how to focus on a screen for 5 to 10 minutes, because our kids are really good at multitasking, but when you're wanting to learn something and understand the concept, you need to remove those barriers. So you teach them how to watch a video, how to explicitly watch a video, and then they have to summarize it. And again, that requires a little bit of teaching around that too, what students should be looking out for, what points they should be writing down. And that's one of the cool things about the flipped classroom, is that a student can pause at any time. They can pause the video and write stuff down and think about a concept that you've just presented. In the classroom, you might be talking about something, and we have a big, wide range of learners in the classroom. Little Jimmy over there is going to be struggling, while John over in the corner is like, come on, man, hurry up. I know this stuff already. So you're trying to appeal to all these groups. But with a flip video, anyone can pause it at any time. They watch it at their own pace. If they know it, they can skip ahead, move on to the next video if you've got those lined up back to back. So it's really powerful having that there. So they summarize things as they go. But one of the most important parts I found for me was getting the kids to create a question. Yeah. And that's based on the content that they watch. It could be related to a new word that they heard. It could be something they misunderstood about the concept. It could be anything really, as long as it's related to the content. And when we go into the lesson the next day, or whenever their next lesson is, that would normally be a theory lesson. We always start, they would come in and they would know that the first thing they're going to do is sit down in their group and they're going to compare questions. Now, I give them about 5 minutes for that. And while they're doing that, I would go around the classroom and check off. I'd have a little check sheet to make sure that they're doing the work. Because again, you got to make sure they're doing it. Otherwise, the next step in the process becomes irrelevant. So while they're doing that, they're having a good discussion, and then we go into about 5 minutes of student-led questioning. So within their groups, they pick the best question, and they'll present that to the class. And I step back from that, and I allow them as the class to work through those questions and answers themselves. And you see some really good discussion and critical thought coming through in that step. And that would usually last maybe another 5 to 10 minutes. And then you're left with 40 minutes to just explore those concepts in a real world. And that's just so much better for me in terms of comparing it to standing at a whiteboard and chalking and talking. I hate that.
For 40 minutes of it.
Yeah, it's a killer. I mean, you don't want to teach like that. It's not good teaching. You want to be exploring these ideas, allowing the students to create things and inquire and stuff like that. It's so much more powerful to have that time in the bank where you can just approach the concept in any way you want.
Yeah, it is. It's time in the bank. And the critics would say, I like the concept, but I don't want to go ahead and produce all this content ahead of class. But I mean, essentially, you're doing it anyway. You're making the content. You're just sort of reversing the order in which you're delivering it. And then a lot of the content that you're doing in your class is probably student generated through things like activities and things that you set up. So if you just change your mindset around it, it's probably not as much work as you think. Now, am I right in saying that there's a lot of value in also just picking out a couple of key units that maybe you can do it with, rather than saying, all right, I'm going to do my whole year and start now, just pick out a couple of those key things?
Yeah, especially if you're starting out, you want to pick something that is going to have is more suitable to the flipped classroom. You can flip anything pretty much, but there are key standards that are much greater. You'll get much greater buy-in from the kids. For us, I always started with our biomechanics units, which are generally our toughest units, but you can be talking about something like force summation. And instead of chalking and talking, you can give them a 5-minute, 10-minute video and talk about body segments and timing and sequencing and stuff like that. And they have all that content. And then the next lesson, instead of talking on that, you're outside throwing a ball around or kicking a ball and removing body segments, so they have to try to throw the ball without generating as much force, and you're linking back to that content and they're experiencing that firsthand, instead of a traditional classroom where you introduce the topic, you chalk and talk for 45 minutes, and then you say, all right, for homework, go out and throw a ball a couple of times and throw from your waist, and you've got no support from your peers, you've got no support from me, and then we'll good luck for the assessment. That's kind of where a traditional classroom is. Don't get me wrong, we've taught in the traditional way for years and years and years, and it's been fine, but that doesn't mean it's good teaching and a good approach to how we can deliver learning. I mean, I like the idea of picking those couple of units that have some real leverage and introducing it there. And when you were saying that, I'm just thinking about all the analogies and parallels in the real world where we don't do what the classroom traditional setting is. I mean, imagine if we got kids and said, all right, you've just done your driver's license test, the paper written version. Now we know that you can, understand this stuff. And then we just said, all right, out onto the roads. With no adult supervision, and that's sort of a parallel, I guess, to that flipped learning, where you're actually providing some assistance with the people, where they are, which I think is the powerful force. Now, my next question sort of relates to the next thing that I would probably hear people mention occasionally, which is, this sounds great, but I don't teach any theoretical components in my world, in my PE space. So, does this apply in a practical setting? And I mean, have you ever had any thoughts around how you could do it, even in a small way? Whether it was, just front loading kids with the next skill they're going to be doing ahead of time, or whatever that might be? Yeah, I like that concept of, front loading some kids. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. And for a lot of, we have a lot of learners who learn in different ways, and some are more visual, some are more kinesthetic. So it's a little bit about appealing to the different style of learner. But if you can provide a bit of knowledge around a skill and break a skill down, and have students getting a better general understanding of things to look out for at different segments of a skill or around timing or whatever, but
Yeah.
introducing a skill and being able to elaborate a lot more, and they have that prior learning before they come into class, then you're going to see, I guarantee you're going to see much greater success in terms of performance on the sports field in that practical setting. Guarantee it, hands down.
For sure.
You know, you bring a kid in fresh with no prior learning or prior experience and say, okay, today we're going to learn how to pass a rugby ball or throw an American football or whatever. You're starting from scratch.
Yep.
So you're going to have to make some time up. But if you can present some good teaching around some skill learning, then there's always going to be a benefit there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's much easier for us because we have that theory component. But that doesn't mean if you don't have that theory component that you can't flip a classroom.
Oh, completely. You know, Christina Politeco, she did a session in the Connected PE online conference where she was using it pretty much primarily in primary PE settings and in practical situations. And, you know, she was flipping her class, but it was just like front loading, getting the kids excited about the next activities that they were doing in the next week. You know, little things they could go home and do. Just to practice those skills so that the concept and the names and things weren't foreign to them. I guarantee when the kids get in the next week, they've probably practiced that. They've probably, you know, had a bit of an experience with it and familiar with some of the names. And I think that, you know, serves a really wide purpose. So a lot of value in that practical setting as well. Now, my final question for you, after all of your experience around, you know, sort of flipped learning and seeing it work, you decided to go down the path of building this platform to help people deliver this for their own schools in New Zealand. Do you just want to share a little bit about what you've done and how it all works?
Yeah, so I've spoken in a few places around flip learning, presented in Tasmania, and I've done a couple of other presentations around New Zealand, and I've done some of the online conferences. And I'm such a big advocate for flip learning. But the same answer I get over and over again is, no, the content creation is too hard, and I don't want to do the content creation. I don't want to build this. I don't have time to do this. And I saw that as a real barrier for teachers who want to flip. And it comes back to what I said before. It's not about the content. It's about being able to repurpose your classroom time so that you can develop a more meaningful experience for your students. So I thought, well, why not just build the content for the teachers? And as you know, because you've had a lot of input into me starting off on this venture and helped me along the way, but we decided that it was something that I was going to build, and I got started last year by creating this content, which is essentially videos paired with automated quizzes, which are self-graded, so that checks off the whole student understanding side of things.
Nice.
So they immediately can see how well they've understood the content, and then the teacher can get that data as well. So it's videos for every single achievement standard that we offer in senior PE paired with automated quizzes. And we also have in some badging systems to increase student engagement and motivation. So that's gamification, which I've spoken on earlier in the year in the Connected PE online conference. And we sell this package to schools, and they purchase access for their students and teachers, and the kids log in in a whole range of ways. Different schools are doing it in different ways, but generally it's to support their learning outside of the classroom, with teachers then coming in and repurposing their classroom time. So we've had a lot of success so far. We've got about a tad over 60 schools on board, which is much greater than I anticipated when we started out, and that equates to around about 5,000 students once they're all on board, which is really cool. You know, it's such a cool feeling to know that I'm adding some form of value to not just the 120 kids I teach each week, but students all over the country. And the feedback so far has been really good and positive, and I've learnt a lot through this process. It's been really cool.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, it's the ability to impact is massive. And I think the real leverage here for teachers is that, you know, that big reason why they might have said no to taking on this approach, the content, is done for them. You know, they can sort of just go ahead and start to use those repurposed time even more meaningfully. So I think it's such a tremendous thing that you've built over at My Study Series. And if you've not seen it, head along there, check out what he's got to offer, and sign up. I know that you're always innovating in that space, so I'm certain that there's going to be even more things that are racking away in your head about how you could take it to different levels and directions, and I'm sort of excited to see what you come out with.
Yeah, definitely. It's once you start learning about some of the things that can be done, it does get exciting, and you do want to push the envelope a little bit more and challenge the status quo. So that's kind of what we're hoping to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I love it. So thanks for stopping by. I think it's a really important topic, this idea of going a bit more. I guess the real basis of it is allowing us to go a bit more deeper than what we tend to see as a traditional classroom experience. Whether that is in a practical setting, theoretical setting, how you can flip the dynamic of what we've always done and maybe use the time that we have with the students in a better way. And I think you do it better than anyone in our PE space does. And thanks for stopping by. Look forward to seeing what's up in the future.
No, I really appreciate you having me on the podcast, Jared. Cheers, mate.
Yeah, welcome. Everyone, you can get a link to the session notes over at thepegeek.com/81 for episode 81. And for any questions, you know where to go at thepegeek.com/contact. Speak soon.